My name is Rachel Morgan. I'm 26 years old, and the night everything shifted started around my parents' dinner table. It was supposed to be a warm Sunday evening, a family tradition we'd had since I was a little girl. But as I sat there, surrounded by the smell of roasted chicken and sweet potato casserole, I felt the sting of words that cut deeper than I could have ever imagined. One sentence from my own parents stripped away years of belonging, and in that moment, I realized things would never be the same again. White right pointing backhand index before I tell you what happened next. Let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. I can still picture that night with painful clarity, the clinking of silverware, the soft hum of the ceiling fan, the dim yellow glow of the dining room chandelier. It was late autumn, and the air outside carried a chill that made the windows fog. Inside, though, the table was set perfectly, as if nothing could possibly go wrong. My mom had pulled out her grandmother's china plates, the ones with the tiny blue flowers circling the rim. Dad was carving the chicken, my younger brother Ethan was scrolling on his phone, and my older sister, Claire, was already halfway through her second glass of wine. Dinner at my parents' house always came with a certain heaviness. Conversations weren't conversations, they were competitions. Who had the better job, the bigger promotion, the nicer apartment? Claire was a lawyer at a big firm in Chicago, Ethan was finishing grad school. And then there was me, working part-time as a leasing assistant, slowly piecing together enough savings to breathe without debt crushing me. I'd long since stopped trying to measure up, but that didn't stop them from reminding me of the gap every chance they got. "Rachel," my mom said, in that overly polite tone she used when she was about to make a dig, "how's your little job going?" Still handing out flyers and answering phones. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "Actually, it's been good. I've been learning a lot about property management." Claire smiked, tilting her wine glass. "Property management? Come on, Ratch. That's just a fancy way of saying you're a receptionist." The table erupted in laughter. Not the warm kind that draws you in, but the sharp, cruel kind that leaves you exposed. My father didn't laugh, but he didn't defend me either. He just kept carving his chicken as if nothing had happened. I pushed the mashed potatoes around my plate, wishing I could disappear. But then it happened, the sentence that burned itself into my memory like a brand. My mom leaned back in her chair, shaking her head with a sigh. "You know, Claire's right. You're really just a tenant in life. Even here, this house, it doesn't feel like yours anymore. You're just a tenant, Rachel. That's all." The room went quiet for a second. My fork froze in mid-E. A tenant. Not a daughter. Not family. Just someone renting space in a life that no longer belonged to me. Claire snorted. "Harsh, Mom, but not entirely wrong." Ethan chuckled under his breath, eyes still on his phone. My chest tightened, and my face grew hot. I wanted to scream, to stand up and tell them they had no idea who I was or what I was capable of. But my voice wouldn't come. Instead, I felt small, like I was 12 again, sitting at that same table, getting scolded for bringing home a B on a report card. The humiliation settled deep, wrapping around me like a cold blanket. Every bite of food turned to ash in my mouth. I looked at each of them, the family I had loved, trusted, sacrificed for, and all I saw were walls. Walls that I didn't belong behind. I excused myself halfway through dinner, claiming I had work in the morning. My dad barely nodded. Mom muttered something about packing the leftovers, and Claire made a joke about me needing them since my paycheck probably didn't stretch far. The sound of their laughter followed me down the hallway like an echo I couldn't shake. In the car, I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My reflection in the rear-view mirror stared back at me, eyes red, jaw clenched, lips trembling. I replayed every word, every smake, every moment of silence that let those words hang heavy and unchallenged. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in my small one-bedroom apartment, staring at the blank walls, hearing my mother's voice on repeat. "You're just a tenant." But here's the thing. Words like that don't just hurt. They plant something. A seed. And when it's watered by silence, by humiliation, by years of being overlooked, it grows into resolve. The humiliation that night didn't end at the dinner table. It followed me at work the next day, when I tried to answer phones with a steady tone but my hand still shook. It showed up when I stopped by the grocery store and wondered if the cashier could see the shame on my face. It whispered in my ear when I opened my laptop at midnight, scrolling through listings and budgets, trying to prove, if only to myself, that I was more than what they saw. A week later, my mom called, acting like nothing had happened. She asked about my job again, in the same sing-song tone, and told me Claire had just been promoted. I gave short answers, holding back the storm inside me. But I didn't forget, and I didn't forgive. Because sometimes humiliation doesn't just crush you, it reshapes you. That night at the dinner table, when my own parents called me just a tenant, something shifted. I decided I'd never again let them, or anyone, define my worth. And while they laughed over roasted chicken and cheap wine, I quietly made a promise to myself. They thought I was a tenant. One day, I'd show them who really owned the table. The night of the dinner table humiliation didn't fade. It etched itself into me. Every time I looked in the mirror, I heard my mother's voice. "You're just a tenant." It was cruel, but it also became fuel. I wasn't going to fight them with words. I decided to fight with results. But results don't come overnight. They come with long days, late nights, and endless moments when no one's watching. That's how the years ahead unfolded for me, quiet, unglamorous effort that no one in my family cared to see. At work, I started volunteering for every extra task no one else wanted. Filing tenant complaints, walking through drafty apartments in the dead of winter, coordinating repairs with grumpy contractors who never showed up on time. I became the person who knew the details, leases, rent cycles, maintenance costs. My boss, Mr. Keller, a gray-haired man with a perpetually stained tie, noticed. "You stick around, Rachel," he said one Friday evening when the office had emptied out. He glanced at the stack of files in my arms. "Most people can't handle the grind. You get it." Those words didn't sound like much, but to me they were oxygen. At home, I was dismissed. At work, someone finally saw me. Still, when Sunday dinners rolled around, nothing changed. My mom would brag about Claire's latest case win, Ethan's scholarship. Then she'd glance at me, her lips tightening into that thin smile. "Rachel, still doing your little office job?" "Yes, Mom," I'd say quietly, even though by then I was the one keeping the office afloat. Claire always found her jab. "Oh, don't sound so sensitive. It's honest work, right? I mean, someone has to make copies." They never asked if I was happy. They never asked if I had dreams. To them, my existence was small, barely worth acknowledging. But while they dismissed me, I was learning something invaluable: patience. Late at night, I pored over housing market reports, articles about investments, and case studies of people who had turned small beginnings into ownership. I taught myself the language of property, equity, cash flow, liabilities. My friends were out at bars or going on weekend trips. I was sitting at my kitchen table with highlighters and spreadsheets, building knowledge that nobody knew I had. There were days it was exhausting. I remember one night, after a 12-hour shift at the office, my neighbor knocked. "Rachel, your car's being towed." I ran outside, heart pounding, only to find that my old Corolla had broken down again, blocking the entrance. Standing there, watching the tow truck hook it up, I felt a rush of humiliation. Another bill, another reminder of how precarious my life was. My hands shook as I signed the slip, and I thought about calling my parents for help. But I didn't. Instead, I worked double shifts for the next 2 weeks to pay for the repairs. Quiet effort, unnoticed by the world, but mine. Years passed like that. Small victories, hidden struggles. At one point, I managed to save enough for a down payment on a tiny condo, not glamorous, not in a trendy neighborhood, but it was mine. When I told my mom, she frowned. "A condo? Rachel, You don't even know how to take care of yourself. Who's going to fix things when they break? I'll figure it out, I said simply. She laughed, shaking her head. Don't stretch yourself too thin. You're not cut out for independence. Those words should have broken me. Instead, I tucked them away, right next to "You're just a tenant." They became part of the fire. I started making quiet choices that no one knew about. When my boss hinted at retiring, I stayed late to shadow him, learning everything I could. When he finally did step down, the company didn't hire some outsider. They handed me the role. Property manager. The title didn't make headlines, but to me, it was monumental. Yet, at the next family dinner, my news fell flat. Property manager. Claire said, raising an eyebrow. So you're, what? The landlord's assistant now? No, I corrected softly. I run the operations. But no one heard me. Or maybe they didn't want to. That was the rhythm of those years. I would push forward, quietly building something brick by brick, and they would dismiss it with a wave of the hand. At times, I questioned myself. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was fooling myself. One winter evening, exhausted after a day of tenant complaints and a burst pipe in the basement, I sat at my kitchen table staring at my bills. The heat wasn't working well, and I had to wear 2 sweaters indoors. Tears slipped down my cheeks as I whispered to the empty room. Am I enough? Will I ever be enough? But deep inside, a stronger voice answered back. Keep going. So I did. I picked up side jobs consulting for small landlords who couldn't manage their properties. It started with 1 client, then 2, then 5. I'd come home from my day job, eat a quick dinner, then spend hours balancing spreadsheets, writing reports, and troubleshooting problems for buildings I didn't own. It wasn't glamorous, but it was progress. And here's the thing about quiet effort. It compounds. One skill builds on another. One opportunity leads to the next. Slowly, I found myself not just working for landlords, but thinking like one. The years blurred together, tenants moving in and out, roofs leaking, boilers breaking down, endless calls and endless paperwork. Each problem was a grind, but each solution made me sharper. My family never noticed. To them, I was still just Rachel, the one who hadn't measured up. At times, I wished desperately for them to see me, to say, "We're proud of you." But the silence taught me something else. Validation couldn't be my fuel. My own quiet resolve had to be. Looking back now, those years feel like a long stretch of shadows, dismissal from the people I loved most, paired with effort no one applauded. But those shadows became the soil where my resilience grew. And though they didn't know it, every insult, every dismissal, every ignored milestone was shaping me into something they'd never see coming. The first time I held a property deed in my hands, I cried. Not polite tears, not the kind you wipe away quickly, but deep, uncontrollable sobs that came from years of being overlooked, dismissed, underestimated. My hands shook as I traced the embossed seal, the official stamp of ownership. For so long, I had been just a tenant in everyone's eyes. Now, I was the landlord. It wasn't a glamorous building. In fact, the place was falling apart when I bought it. A squat, brick 4-unit apartment complex on the edge of town. Its walls were stained with years of neglect, and the roof leaked whenever it rained. But it was mine. Every cracked tile, every rusted pipe, every drafty window, it belonged to me. I remember unlocking the door that first night, the smell of dust and old carpet rushing out to greet me. I walked through each unit slowly, running my fingers along the walls. These were the very kinds of walls my family had once mocked me for just managing. Now, I wasn't managing for someone else. I was building something for myself. "Looks like you've got your work cut out for you," Mr. Keller said when he stopped by. He'd retired months earlier but still checked in on me from time to time. His smile carried pride, the kind my family never gave me. "I know," I whispered, looking at the peeling paint above me. "But I've been preparing for this." The first few months nearly broke me. Tenants called at all hours, leaking sinks, broken heaters, a squirrel that somehow found its way into the attic. Contractors charged more than I could afford, so I learned to fix things myself. I spent weekends on ladders, in crawl spaces covered in plaster dust and paint. My hands blistered, my back ached, but each repair felt like proof I wasn't a tenant anymore. Still, the weight of ownership wasn't just physical, it was emotional. Every time I sent out rent notices, I thought of my mother's words, "You're not cut out for independence." Every time I fixed something another landlord had ignored, I thought of the smug smile Claire gave me at dinner. They had no idea who I was becoming, brick by brick. One evening, after finishing a patch job on a water-damaged ceiling, I sat on the floor of Unit 2 with takeout Chinese food in my lap. The apartment smelled faintly of bleach and fresh paint, and the sound of traffic hummed faintly through the window. I opened a fortune cookie, and the slip inside read, "What you build quietly will one day speak loudly." I laughed out loud, tears stinging my eyes. The truth is, the building became more than an investment. It became a reflection of me. Every corner I repaired, every space I cleaned, every tenant I listened to with genuine care. It all mirrored the way I was repairing the broken parts of myself. Then came the moment I didn't expect. My family found out. It was during a holiday dinner when Claire, ever curious, casually asked, "So, Rachel, still juggling papers at your little job?" I could have brushed it off like always, but instead, I looked her square in the eye and said, "Actually, I bought my own building." The room went silent. Forks froze midair. My mother's glass clinked as she set it down. "You, what?" she asked, her voice sharp. "I own a property now," I repeated, steady and calm. 4 units. Tenants, leases, everything. Claire scoffed. "You? A landlord? Don't be ridiculous." "I'm not being ridiculous," I said, pulling the deed from my purse. I hadn't planned on showing it, but something in me wanted them to see proof. I laid it on the table between us. My father leaned closer, squinting at the paper. "This is real," he muttered. For the first time in years, they didn't have a comeback. No dismissive laugh. No cutting remark. Just stunned silence. But here's the thing. I wasn't seeking their validation anymore. Their disbelief was satisfying, but the real victory was mine alone. The months turned into years, and that one building became 2, then 3. Each acquisition carried its own battles, loans, negotiations, sleepless nights of calculating risks, but with every closing, my confidence grew. I became strategic, sharp, resilient. I'll never forget the day I walked through a high-rise lobby downtown to finalize the purchase of a property bigger than anything I once dreamed of. As I signed the papers, I thought of my mother's voice again. "You're just a tenant." The irony made me smile. Later, standing in the lobby, I pressed my palm against the cool marble wall. These were no longer walls that belonged to someone else. They were mine. The very walls that once symbolized my smallness had become proof of my strength. And still, my family didn't understand. At another gathering, Claire tried again. "Don't you get tired of dealing with tenants? It sounds exhausting." I smiled. "It's work, but it's worth it." "What's worth it?" she pushed. I leaned back, meeting her gaze, owning the very walls people once mocked me for. Her face twisted, but she had no words. For once, I wasn't the one silenced. Every insult, every dismissal, every moment they thought I was less, it had all built to this. My empire wasn't flashy, but it was solid, built with my hands, my mind, my quiet determination. And as I locked up my buildings each night, I felt a quiet pride they could never take away. Because I knew the truth, I hadn't just proven them wrong. I had proven myself right. The night of the dinner, I felt the air tighten the moment I stepped into my parents' house. Their dining room hadn't changed in years. Mahogany table polished to a shine, lace runner stretched neatly across, crystal glasses reflecting the overhead chandelier. It was the kind of table where appearances mattered more than feelings, where words were served sharper than the steak knives beside our plates. Claire was already there, of course, swirling her wine as if she owned the world. My mother fluttered between the kitchen and dining room, fussing over small details while avoiding looking at me for too long. My father sat with his usual stern posture, ready to preside over the evening like a judge in his court. I chose a seat near the end, not too close to the head but far enough to keep some distance. I knew what this dinner was really about. It was never just a meal. It was a stage, and tonight, I was ready to perform. The first few minutes were filled with small talk. Claire bragged about her latest promotion at the firm, dropping numbers and names like confetti. My mother nodded eagerly, her smile wide and approving. My father asked sharp, deliberate questions, the kind that cornered you into either sounding brilliant or foolish. When their eyes turned to me, I sipped my water slowly. "So, Rachel," Claire said, her tone dripping with false curiosity, "still busy playing landlord to your little tenants?" A low chuckle circled the table. My father smirked. My mother pressed her napkin against her lips as if to hide her amusement. I felt the familiar heat rise in my chest, the same heat I had felt years ago at this very table when they called me just a tenant. But this time, I wasn't here to swallow it down. This time, I had brought the truth with me. I set my glass down carefully, the stem clicking against the wood. "Actually," I said, my voice steady, "things have changed." Claire tilted her head. "Oh, found a new hobby?" "No," I replied, my eyes locking with hers. "I bought this house." The room froze. For a split second, the only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. My mother blinked rapidly, her fork slipping against her plate. My father leaned forward, his brows knitting together. Claire laughed, sharp and incredulous. "You're joking." I reached into my bag and pulled out the folded paperwork, the deed I had been saving for this very moment. I placed it on the table, right in the center, letting the official seal catch the chandelier's light. "No joke," I said. "This house, the one we're sitting in, is mine now." My father's jaw tightened. He grabbed the paper, his eyes darting across the lines, scanning for some trick. My mother leaned in, her hand trembling as she read over his shoulder. Claire sat frozen, her smirk fading by the second. "You bought our home," my mother whispered, her voice cracking. "Yes," I said simply. "From the bank. It was listed after you fell behind on the payments." Silence fell like a stone. I could almost hear their pride shattering, piece by piece. Claire finally found her voice. "Why would you do this? To humiliate us?" I shook my head. "No, I did it because I could. Because all those years you called me small, all those dinners where you dismissed me, I was building something. Quietly, patiently, and now, here we are." My father slammed the paper down, his face flushed. "This is manipulation. You think owning property gives you power over us." I leaned forward, my tone calm but unyielding. "It's not about power over you. It's about reclaiming what you tried to take from me, my worth." My mother's eyes filled with tears. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. For the first time, I saw not authority in her gaze, but fear. I let the silence sit, let them feel it. Then I added softly, "I'm not here to destroy you, but I need you to understand. I'm no longer the girl you mocked. I own the walls around us, and I own the strength you thought I'd never find." Claire scoffed again, but it lacked the sharpness from before. "So what? You think buying some buildings makes you better than us?" I smiled faintly. "No, it makes me better than who I was when you tried to break me. That's enough." The rest of the meal was a hollow echo of its beginning. Fox scraped plates, but no one really ate. My father pushed his food around like he could rearrange reality with a spoon. My mother kept her eyes down, her napkin clutched tight. Claire sipped her wine too quickly, her jaw tight with resentment. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The truth sat between us, louder than any insult they could throw. As dessert was brought out, a pie my mother had proudly baked, I excused myself. I stood, smoothed my dress, and gathered my bag. Leaving already? Claire asked, her tone brittle. Yes, I said. I came here to tell you the truth. And I did. I walked to the door, my heels clicking against the hardwood, the house echoing differently now that I knew it was mine. At the doorway, I paused and looked back one last time. My parents sat small at their own table. Claire's glass was empty, her eyes fixed anywhere but on me. This house used to be yours, I said quietly. Now it's mine. Think about that the next time you call someone just a tenant. And with that, I left. The night air outside was crisp, and for the first time in years, I felt light. The humiliation they once used to bind me had been unraveled. The reveal was complete. The cold night air kissed my skin as I stepped out of the house. The door shut softly behind me, but the echo inside my chest was deafening. For years, that house had been a prison of small words and sharper looks. Tonight, though, it wasn't a cage anymore. It was proof of how far I had come. The porch light flickered above me, a weak bulb that never seemed to stay fixed. As a child, I used to beg my father to replace it, worried the shadows would swallow me on late nights. He never did. I remember him saying, "It's just a light, Rachel. Stop fussing." But tonight, I didn't feel swallowed. I stood taller, the darkness no longer something to fear but something I owned. I walked down the steps slowly, my heels pressing against the wood, each step steady and deliberate. My car was parked at the curb, where I had left it hours ago. I unlocked it but didn't get in right away. Instead, I leaned against the door, folded my arms, and stayed back at the house. Through the lace curtains, I could see their silhouettes, 3 figures sitting at the same table, motionless, as if the weight of what had happened pinned them down. My father hunched forward, his hand gripping the deed like it was a weapon he didn't know how to use. My mother's shoulders curved inward, her head bowed. Claire's figure tilted back, her wine glass raised but untouched. I thought I might feel triumphant seeing them like that. But the truth was, I didn't. There was no joy in their defeat, just a deep, settling calm inside me. For the first time, I realized revenge wasn't about watching them suffer. It was about finally walking away without needing their approval, their validation, or even their love. A car drove past slowly, its headlights washing over me before fading into the distance. The sound snapped me out of my thoughts. I climbed into my car, shut the door, and started the engine. The hum was steady, grounding. I placed my hands on the wheel and whispered to myself, "It's over." But as I drove away, memories flooded in. The nights I cried myself to sleep after family dinners, wondering why nothing I did was ever enough. The mornings I forced myself to work 2 jobs, saving every penny while Claire bought designer handbags. The days my mother said, "Rachel, maybe you're just not cut out for more." I gripped the wheel tighter, tears stinging my eyes. I wasn't just driving away from a house. I was driving away from years of being told I was less. The ache inside me didn't vanish, but it softened, like a wound that had finally been stitched closed. Halfway home, I stopped at a gas station. The neon sign buzzed, the lot mostly empty. I filled my tank, then walked inside for a bottle of water. The cashier, a young man with tired eyes, smiled faintly. "Evening," he said. "Evening," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. As I left, I caught my reflection in the glass door. For years, I had avoided mirrors, not wanting to see the exhaustion etched into my face. Tonight, though, I looked, really looked. I saw strength in the lines of my jaw, resilience in the curve of my shoulders, and clarity in my eyes. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was becoming someone I could finally be proud of. When I got home, my apartment felt different too. It was quiet, simple, but it was mine. I kicked off my heels, set my bag down, and curled into the couch with a blanket. My phone buzzed with a message from Claire. I didn't have to read it to know it would be dripping with anger or disbelief. I silenced it, set the phone face down, and closed my eyes. The silence was soothing. No voices cutting me down. No laughter at my expense. Just peace. Over the next few weeks, the fallout from that dinner spread like cracks in a foundation. My father called twice, both times leaving stiff voicemails about discussing the matter. My mother sent a letter, written in shaky cursive, apologizing without ever really saying the word sorry. Claire didn't reach out at all. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to punish them, but because I no longer needed to. Their approval wasn't currency anymore. I had built a life that didn't depend on it. Instead, I poured my energy into my buildings, my tenants, my woke. I visited properties, fixed problems, listened to people's stories. One tenant, Mrs. Jackson, an older woman who reminded me of the grandmother I'd never had, said to me one afternoon, "You're not like most landlords. You actually care." Her words landed deeper than she knew, because in caring for those buildings, in caring for the people inside them, I was learning to care for myself. One evening, months later, I walked past my parents' old house. The porch light had been fixed, glowing warmly against the night. Tenants lived there now, college kids, a young couple, a retired teacher. They waved to me as I passed, and I waved back. I smiled, realizing something profound. That house wasn't just a symbol of pain anymore. It was part of a future I had created, a future where I wasn't invisible. And yet, the greatest power I felt wasn't in owning the house, or even in proving my parents wrong. It was in realizing I didn't have to keep fighting for their recognition. I had walked into that dinner carrying years of anger. I walked out carrying peace. The past would always be part of me, but it no longer defined me. My worth wasn't tied to their table or their opinions. It was mine, finally mine. As I stood outside that house one last time, I whispered to the night, "I forgive you, but I'll never forget." Then I turned, walked away, and didn't look back.